Hi theory students. Today we're continuing our study of SATB style. We'll be talking about parts of the basic phrase, and we'll also be talking about cadence types. A phrase is a basic unit of musical thought. It's similar in a way to a sentence in English. And just like sentences in English, phrases have a grammar to them, which include a way to start a phrase and a way to end a phrase. The end of the phrase is called a cadence, and it's music's version of punctuation. In addition to the local level, where every harmony gets a Roman numeral analysis, we can also look at a phrase from a larger or contextual level. At this contextual level, phrases generally have at least three parts: establishing the tonic, moving to the dominant, and then resolving back to the tonic. We label this T, D, T. T for tonic, D for dominant, T for tonic. If you look at some of the examples in the book, example 12.9 and example 12.10, they show this basic idea. So in 12.9, from a Haydn scherzo, we hear it starting as tonic for two measures rather, and then a dominant seventh in measure 3, and then the tonic in measure 4. Sometimes a phrase doesn't make it all the way to the tonic at the end, and instead we'll have the opening tonic, but then the phrase ends on the dominant chord. We'll talk about that when we deal with cadences, and we'll see examples of that as well. Example 12.10 is like this model. Any of these areas may be expanded. The opening tonic can be expanded, the dominant area can be expanded, and the closing tonic can be expanded. As we continue to study harmony, most of what we study will be the many ways to make these expansions. They can include things like simple repetition, or we could have motion into and out of inversions, or we could have motions to other harmonies before returning to the expanded chord. What I just played can be seen in these examples. So in the first example, I went from a 1 to a 1-6 and back to a 1. That expands the tonic area. In the next example, I went from a 1 to a 5-6 and back to a 1, and that expands the tonic area as well. Look at example 12.13 to see how complicated some of these expansions could be. So this is from a phrase of a Bach chorale. In this chorale, we have the dominant area at the very end of the phrase, and everything before that is an expansion of the tonic area. We have an anacrusis to the tonic that expands it at the front end. And here we have a 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 6 to 1, 5, 6, 5 to 1. All we're doing is going to other places and recycling back to 1 before it moves on to the dominant. How do you know that this dominant or that dominant is not where I put the D in the phrase? Generally, I put the D on the dominant chord that's going to form the end of the phrase or the cadence. So let's talk about cadence types now. In general, we've learned that cadences, the ends of phrases, may be conclusive or inconclusive. An authentic cadence is a conclusive cadence, usually signified by the movement of 5 to 1. So in this particular case, on the left, if a phrase ends there, that sounds very conclusive. Even if it goes this way, with scale degree 3 on top, it's a little less conclusive than with scale degree 1, but it's still somewhat conclusive, especially compared to something like this, where we end on a 5 chord. If I pick my hand up there, it feels like we want it to go there, but we interrupt the motion to 1 and just leave the 5 chord hanging. That's an inconclusive cadence. The inconclusive cadence, in contrast to the authentic that's conclusive, the inconclusive is called a half cadence, and it's usually signified by the last chord being a dominant chord. In the tonic-dominant tonic structure that we just talked about, the dominant tonic part at the end is what makes for an authentic cadence. A phrase with a half cadence is structured with an opening tonic and then a dominant at the end only. It doesn't have the tonic at the end. And it's a lack of the ending tonic that makes it sound inconclusive. Here's a further refinement. Among the authentic cadences, the perfect authentic cadence is one where the bass moves from scale degree 5 to scale degree 1, and a soprano also has scale degree 1 at the end. Let's go back to this example we just heard. So the one on the left note that we have 5-1 in the bass, or in other words, a root position dominant to a root position tonic chord. And when we end on that tonic chord, we also have the tonic in the top part as well. That's a perfect authentic cadence, which we abbreviate PAC, and that's our most conclusive cadence. Every other authentic cadence is called an imperfect authentic cadence, which we abbreviate IAC. One example I have here is where scale degree 3 is on top at the end. So even though I have 5-1 in the bass, ending with 3 on top is a little less conclusive than ending with 1 on top. So rather than define the many ways an authentic cadence can be imperfect, it's easier just to say we have very stringent conditions for a perfect authentic cadence, and all of the other authentic cadences are imperfect. Some of the ways that the imperfect authentic cadence may be heard is if the bass does not have root position 5 to 1, or as I just showed you, if the soprano line ends on scale degree 3, or less commonly scale degree 5, with a 1 chord at the end. We'll look at some examples in class, and that's where we're going to end today's video.